Hey, and did you know I'm currently accepting new patients in New York, offering both in person and telehealth visits? And I also provide telehealth for patients in Michigan, with North Carolina coming soon. And I also offer coaching, both intimacy coaching and menopause coaching, nationally and internationally. So look us up on www.femvhealth.com. I am an American board certified OBGYN, a mom, a Muslim, and I'm talking about sex. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast. Welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sadaf, and this episode is everything you need to know about mental health and mental health support and all the great things that go along with it. Remember, this is not meant to be any type of medical advice. So if you have any questions about your mental health or you're seeking help, please make sure you go speak with your healthcare provider and see a specialist that specializes in mental health. And remember, this is not meant to be any type of religious advice. So if you have any questions about your religion, make sure you go speak with your friendly neighborhood religious leader. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast because I just happen to be a Muslim woman that talks about sex. So today I'm super excited to have on with me Dr. Mona Masood. Dr. Mona, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. Such an important subject. My name is Dr. Mona Masood. I am an outpatient adult psychiatrist in the greater Philadelphia area. I'm also the founder and chief organizer of the Physician Support Line, which is a peer-to-peer support line that unapologetically centers physician mental health and provides peer support for any sort of immediate stressor. Psychiatrists to medical students or physicians at any point in their training.
It's amazing. And so, let's get right into it. So thank you so much for being here. So you're the psychiatrist and founder of this national mental health support line for clinicians and now a published science fiction author that we'll get into as well. What do you think connects all of these parts of your work?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I just want a very quick correction. It's fantasy.
Oh,
Um,
fantasy.
oh,
Okay, sorry.
yeah. No, that's totally fine. They do have so much overlap, so I get that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of intersectionality. I think that that's the thing about being a physician as well. It's we spend a lot of time going through this very particular path in order to achieve this goal, but there's so many sides to being a physician that are very humanistic, and especially in psychiatry, which so much is about narrative and so much is about getting to know a person's story, so to speak. And so, writing a fictional story was not so far from that, especially because storytelling. Um, is a way for us to, and it has always been a way for humans to really connect with deeper themes. When we have a degree of separation from our own lives and we hear it in story, we can make those, we can understand better, we can apply lessons and themes better.
Yeah, amazing. So tell us about the early days of COVID. I think that's when you started that mental health physician support line. Is that correct? And what did you see among the healthcare providers that you felt was a huge need?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah, it started in March of 2020, which is what we all remember, especially in the States, as when,
Yeah.
yeah, when we were first got um, affected by COVID in such acute ways. And so the interesting thing about this, and I'll just go a little bit into how psychiatry plays into this, is that, it wasn't that physicians didn't need mental health support prior. Is that we actually always needed it, but it's often when things, hit the fan and things fall apart. That's when people, when we become desperate, we finally reach for, the resources we should have much before that point. And so it was a window of opportunity. That's how I saw it. And that's how I often see it with patients too, is that, people don't come to us when things are just, you know, difficult or getting worse. They come to us usually when, especially for psychiatry, when things are very, very bad. And so this was an opportunity for me as a psychiatrist when I saw this happening with COVID, and we were forced as physicians to face our mental health and say, really, we're not okay. And now we might actually die from something, and it became so acute that um, I saw it as if I don't address mental health in medicine now, then there's no better time for it. And, that hunch was correct. It was, I just put it out there in our social media groups, in our big physician groups, and not knowing what it would do when I posted, but I basically just said, calling all psychiatrists who's with me and starting a peer support line for our doctors going through it right now. And the response was incredible. It was like, obviously, I wasn't the only one who saw the need because at that time I had 800 psychiatrists sign
Oh
up.
my God. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and the interesting thing about the support line, which again I knew, um, and I hoped for, I guess, would be the outcome, is that it normalized physician mental health to the point that the support line is still running. Like it's still, yeah. And this is now, we just celebrated our 6th anniversary of it being live.
Yeah.
And it's because, mental health isn't just during crisis. We really do have so many different things that we need to address at any given time. So, yeah, that's how it started. But, I'm so thankful that it's still running and still needed.
Yeah, it's absolutely needed. I mean, I think there's such a stigma, so I remember during COVID, it was April of 2020, and I had COVID. I had no idea that I was actually on call, and, I had to go to the operating room, and I, almost passed out, and I had no idea what was going on. I came out of the OR, I started dry heaving, it was awful, and then, somebody suggested that I get tested for COVID, and I was like, "Oh," at the time, I wasn't even thinking that I would have it, and it came out positive, and I was like, "Holy crap." And, at that time, we didn't even know much about COVID, right? So, like, I thought I was gonna die. We're talking about my will our will with, my husband, and then, and you probably know this as well. I mean, the OBGYNs were frontline and,
Yep.
patients were coming in, and we were so scared. We didn't know at that time, the chair of our department was like, "Oh, you don't need to wear a mask." We're like, "No, we have to protect ourselves." And, we were reusing masks. I mean, it's crazy, right? That time in history. I mean, it was really, really scary for a lot of us. So I'm so glad you started it.
Yeah.
So mental health is so stigmatized in so many communities. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a loaded question, but if because this is the Muslim sex podcast, I'll try to focus it to our community, specifically, which again is not a monolith, and so even when we're talking about mental health stigma within Muslims, that too can vary greatly. However, though, some of the patterns that I've noticed, and I've worked with different groups and to do research on mental health in Muslim communities. So some of the patterns that we kind of came away with um, was that, so much of this we wrongfully say is due to lack of faith. That, we're supposed to be putting our trust and in God and in his will and trusting that he's there for us. But what we were missing is that, our part in it, which is what are we doing to help ourselves, like also as Muslims, we have the idea of like, God doesn't help you until you help yourself, like, and so those things, that part was getting missed. And there was being a lot of shame for feeling incapable, for feeling less than, for not having motivation or productivity, feeling sad and questioning things, when those are all part of an illness set rather than it being something that is about the person themselves. And that distinction it's very hard, I think, for Muslims to make because it it keeps bringing up that question about like, well, don't you believe enough? If you believe enough, shouldn't you be able to combat it?
Yeah, yeah, and you hear that all the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you just need to pray more."
Yeah. Oh
Like,
my gosh.
that's the answer to everything, and although it's not a bad suggestion, we all need to pray, but there's more to it, right? And as a psychiatrist,
Yes.
we know it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so that I think is one of the big things about it. Also, we bring and then if you go into that um to the other intersection of a lot of Muslims in America, it's immigration. Yes, we have a lot of people who are born and raised in this country as well, but there's still cultural baggage, and then you have that aspect too. And whether it's again showing strength and resilience and being always always being the best you can be, not showing weakness. It's also an immigrant story because we're so afraid of losing that position in this society. And we always have to, we always were taught you have to be better than, and you have to show the best. And so if you're not meeting those kind of standards, then there must be something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's really tough and always feeling like you're not enough, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever felt that.
Yeah.
But that right? Right? So that seems to be I don't know if it's just an immigrant thing, but it's definitely a thing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So where do you think, like, faith intersects with mental health? When do you think it's protective, and when do you think sometimes, people use it to delay care?
Absolutely. And yes, both things can be true. Like we can hold multiple truths that faith can be protective too. And it's actually been shown in research, not just like the Islamic faith, but people who have faith generally that can be a protective factor in terms of very terrible outcomes such as suicide and things like that. Because it is so frowned upon, so people will be reluctant to go there. So that way it can be protective. However, where it can do harm is just like you said, it does delay care. It delays care because it does not treat medication or even therapy as being an equivalent to something like prayer. And even though as a way of helping the illness, and I think that it's what would be helpful is if we reframed it. And if we reframed it instead of I'm, having to take something or I'm having to see someone about this. And you actually saw it, as kind of like in our faith, it's actually quite prophetic to ask for advice. We literally have words for it. We call it nasiha. And so to ask for advice from someone who is actually objective and who is actually has training in the matter that you're asking for advice for. So, therapy or nasiha is still like the same concept that, when we're struggling, we're not supposed to be doing it alone. We're supposed to be doing it with the, help of others.
Hmm. That's so important, and I think that so many of us don't realize that. How do you think anxiety or depression show up in intimate relationships, especially in long-term marriages?
Yeah. So it can show up a lot, mainly because, and this is not just unique to Muslims at all, actually, but of course we have our own intersections there. But what I see often about this is that when the individual does not see themselves as being important outside of the relationship and always sees themselves as only as the spouse, or what am I doing for my husband, and this especially in women, unfortunately. What am I being a good wife? Am I being a good mom? And when we're always seeing things in relation to somebody else, there's going to be a price that gets paid, like because you're not giving back to yourself. There has to be more of a balance in terms of self care, even though that's a term that's used a lot. It is important to make sure that you are well, and whatever that means to you, and whatever things that nourish you, and while we're nourishing others. And sometimes there will be times where you have to prioritize yourself first anyway, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so that's something that comes up a lot, where it's we forget that we're our own self, and we're not just part of a relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so many women get lost in that, right?
Hmm.
Especially if you, decide to not work outside the house.
Yes.
And, when you are a caretaker of both, like, your family, your kids, and then your husband, and then the house, and all of these other responsibilities, and quite frankly, I feel that it's much harder to work at home than it is outside of the home, right? Like, at least when you leave if you work outside the home, when you leave work, you're done, right? But, like, when you are at home, you're never done. There's always something else that needs to be done, and I feel that, definitely, I think in a lot of communities, women, see their self-worth, right, in relation to their family and how successful, let's say, their kids are, or, how happy their husband, whatever. And like you said, they forget who they are. And
Yeah.
I think that that's huge.
It's huge, and it's a vicarious type of life, you know? It's always and why there's anxiety in that when you live vicariously through other people is because they're having the control. Like, so whatever they do or don't do, if that becomes your identity, then you're so dependent on them, you know? And so that is grounds for anxiety. Anxiety does not like uncertainty. And it likes to know and likes to trust in your own abilities. So if you're not able to, because you don't know what your abilities are, you don't know yourself, and it's so dependent on what other people do or don't do, then you're always going to be anxious, even when things are going well, which is a sad part. I see so many, again, so many women where if somebody is even like, oh, their kid got into the college that they want to, they're still anxious. They're always like, well, what could happen? What could happen? And so it's something to really think about, like knowing who you are, what you care about, what you bring to the table, not just your children or your spouse, is very important in terms of self-preservation and our own health.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so what do you offer to women in terms of like trying to do that self-care that's so important, right? How would you, I guess, suggest for them to build their identity if they don't know anything besides just how to take care of others, right?
Yeah, so this is no, that's a great question. So what I often discuss with them is, first of all, I always tell them there's no wrong answers. If we don't know something, that means we're allowed to brainstorm, we're allowed to make mistakes, we're allowed to do trial and error. And that's actually how human beings learn. We actually, none of us know everything about ourselves from at the starting line. We do explore. Before you and I both decided to become physicians, there was a lot of like, what's out there? Why do I want to do this? It's a big commitment. What's making me want this? And so that happened at some point in our life. And for other people, it's going to happen at a later point in their life. And it doesn't mean that that's wrong. It doesn't mean that it's too late. And that's what I always try to remind them, because that comes up so much, Sadaf, about it's too late though. Like, oh, I'm already in my 40s, or "Oh, why do I like care about this now? Oh, I've lived my life." And that's not based on fact at all. So but it's something that I first work on those foundations. That first you have to think that this is even a worthy thing, and then
Right.
you have to be allowed to make try things and quit them and try other things and see what you're attaching to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important, right? Is
Yeah.
to figuring out your own self-worth. So women in midlife tend to feel disconnected from themselves and their partners. How much of this you think is psychological versus hormonal versus relational?
Oh man, that is. I mean, come on, and you know this. It is so. They're all there. They're all there.
All at the same time.
Yeah, they're
All
all
at
there at
the
the
same time.
same time. That's why this it's like perimenopause, menopause are such fun times. But anyway, but because they're all there. The things that that were never addressed from your own mental health, the relationship stuff that you put off and you put off, and you just grinned and bared it. And then of course your body was like, "I'm done." And so, yeah, like, all three of those things. And that's why I honestly think it's not so much of a midlife crisis, but why we call it that is because all of these things, like, they refuse to not be addressed anymore. Like they have to be addressed now. And so we're forced to. And I if I, we can reframe it and see it more as in, I am where I'm supposed to be. This was bound to happen. And if I can just like, see it as, okay, these questions are coming up. I don't have to be scared of them. I don't have to avoid them. I can try to address them. And I have to prioritize which ones are affecting me most acutely or most immediately, and then kind of go down that list and work on it. For some women it will be their hormones, like it feels like so overwhelming and everything, that internal change. So then for them I'm like, you know what, maybe I think you should go and have a conversation with your OBGYN and see if we can get the biochemical part of this in, if we have options for it, and then we'll address the other ones. But they're all there, man. Like they're all there.
They sure are. And, I was reading that a third of women will develop anxiety and depression, even those that never had it, right, during this perimenopause
Yes.
transition into menopause. And, as you know, better than I do, that there's estrogen receptors throughout, our whole body,
Yes.
but specifically in the brain, right? And that
Yeah.
deal with emotions and memory and all of this stuff. And so, so many women have emotional lability. I would say that I definitely do. I mean, like I
Yep. Same.
cry, drop at a hat. I'm always like, my kids are making fun of me. They're like, oh my God, mom's going to cry again. But it's true because, some women have rage. I'm like the opposite. Like, I get sad about, like, a lot of things, whatever. So, it's so important to, like, normalize this, but also go and seek help and get
Yes.
placed on hormones if you feel like that's right for you or if you're able to, right? Because I think that makes such a difference,
Oh,
in anxiety and depression and all of that stuff.
you got it right. Absolutely. And I've seen it firsthand as a clinician too, with with my women patients in this stage in their life, is that yes, hormone replacement can be a huge game changer. And I feel sad because once again, as much as there's stigma for mental health, there's stigma about menopause. Like just because every woman goes through it does not mean that we're treating it well, or like I feel like this happens for women in so many stages of our life. Well, all women, I should say, so many women get pregnant and have kids, and then they go, and then people are like, "Why are you so sad about it? Or why are you like, feeling anxiety or depression? You didn't you get what you wanted?" Or then we hit menopause, and then we're like, "Well, every woman goes through menopause. You got to suck it up." And I really think we need to get away from this idea of like every person goes through this, and so thus it the validity is not there for you to have a problem with it. And that doesn't make any sense. We're all individual people. Like we're all living. Like, does that then mean that we all should never complain about anything or never feel about anything?
Yeah.
It's a strange thing. And again, I feel like it happens mostly with women. And we're
I
50% of the population.
I agree. And I find that, like when you hear that kind of stuff, it's so dismissive, right?
Yeah.
Like women are not allowed to be human, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not allowed to have emotions. If you get upset, it's like, well, why are you so upset? You shouldn't be so upset. Like people always telling you what like you should or you shouldn't be doing. And it's like, can I just express myself and can I have emotions, right? It's okay to be like that. So what role do you think mental health and burnout play in libido and sexual desire?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, so much. It's definitely one of the things again that people don't like to admit or talk about. Even some of my patients that I've seen for years, like it takes them so much time. They see me very regularly, and to admit something like that, like that they're missing that part in their life and all of that. And whenever I ask them like, why didn't you bring this up before? They're like, that shouldn't. Again, there's a should. This shouldn't be the most important thing. And I'm like, there's no should. If it is, then it is, and it is valid. It's a very valid part of a relationship.
Yeah,
And I think and I think women should not be seeing this as being like, oh well, that's something that is what men care about. Women are like, they're human too. Like, yeah, wanting a healthy intimacy with your partner is like a very normal human need. Like it's a human need. And so for anxiety and depression, it goes for it. Anxiety and depression, just to let everyone know, basically goes for anything that you enjoy or you liked. Like and if these are things that are part of, what we enjoy as human beings. And so it goes for it. It's very common for libido to get affected with anxiety and depression. And addressing the anxiety and depression actually does bring back libido. So these things are these things are very much tied together. And it's not just from the biochemical standpoint. Libido also goes down because of self worth, and if you start seeing yourself as not being good enough, or all those, lies that depression basically makes you tell yourself, then that also doesn't make you want to be intimate either. And so there's a lot of different things that are happening with it. But it definitely is important if you're feeling that and it's coming from, it's coming from, depression or anxiety, definitely bring it up to, whoever you're talking to, whether it's your therapist or your doctors. It's very valid.
Yeah, 100%. So, when people come to me about decreased desire, that's one of the things that we address. In sexual medicine, you always do like the biopsychosocial sphere, right? And so you want to address all of those things. A lot of times it's biological, meaning like it could be chemical, it could be your hormones, it could be something going on like vaginal dryness or pain or stuff like that, right? That could be the whole biological. It could be side effects of medications, but of course, there's a psychological component, right? It's this anxiety and depression, which of course can also interfere and act at your desire, right? It can affect your desire. And then the social aspect of it, where, if somebody was raised in like a sex negative environment or has experienced trauma or abuse or something like that, of course, all of that's going to affect it. And of course, if somebody is like, say, a single mom working like 50 jobs, that's going to affect her desire as well, right? So I think that oftentimes patients are under the misconception that they come in and they'll just get like a pill and then it's
Yeah.
going to solve everything, right? And so what I help them do is address like all of these separate components because they're all so important and they all impact the sexual health. And I also find, and I don't know if you see this kind of, I think you mentioned a little bit, is that patients or people, women, since I specifically deal with women, they often feel that like sex is kind of like I don't know, like a luxury almost, right? Like it's something that like you don't really need. If you have it, that's great, but you don't really need it. Oftentimes I'll get women all the time that'll come to me and they'll be like, well, oh, sex. Well, I gave that up, a long time ago, as if they're giving up smoking or something.
Yes. Oh,
Or that, oh, that just, that's just so not important and I don't care about that. And, it just and I find that, sexual health, like you were just saying, is a big part of a person's health. And, it is part of your overall health. And a lot of people even say it's like it gives you the barometer of a relationship,
mhm.
right? But I feel like so many people dismiss it and find that it's not, oh, it's not that important, let's do other stuff.
Yeah. No, you're right, especially in the Muslim community, especially again with if you're bringing in cultural baggage or the way that it was addressed or more likely not addressed, growing up. And yeah, we bring that all with us, and that's really unfortunate because I think, I mean, again, from an Islamic perspective, and just and for your viewers, of course, we're not scholars. However, from an Islamic perspective, it is actually a very healthy and blessed need, like it's you get reward for this, and so having that with your spouse is a very like rewarding activity. And so for people to kind of like make it something that it's not, I think we need to think about that because it's nowhere mentioned as being anything other than this is one of the main purposes of marriage, or this is one of the main purposes of a relationship, and it brings people close, and and it has a great outcome for many people with with children. Like it has so many things that are always positively associated with it, and
Yeah.
it's just unfortunate that we've gotten to that point. And yeah, I do hope that that is another thing that we destigmatize, and I think generationally we have to destigmatize.
And that all boils down to like, like I'm sure at least, my parents never talked about sex, right? And so, but I'm changing that for my
Yeah.
children and because I want them to grow up to be sex positive, and I want
Yes.
them to know that, in Islam actually is a very sex positive religion, and it's just that we don't know our own history, and I think that that is really a big problem that we have in our communities because so many, and that goes back to colonization and it goes back the British that ruled South Asia for so long and brought the puritanical values and rules and then made it seem like sex was wrong, dirty, shameful, and now we've inherited those values, and so that's what a lot of our communities. I mean, I will say that I brought up the topic of discussing sexual health at one of the big conventions that happened. I'm not going to say which one, but um, and they refused. They refused. They were like, "No, it's not that important," or they just didn't really comment. I mean, and I offered them. It was me and another gynecologist that was going to present, and they wouldn't
Oh,
have it, they
wow.
wouldn't have the topic, and I was like, it's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
Even at, a smaller, one of these bigger other conventions, and
Sure.
it was the same thing. They just, they feel there's so much taboo around it that they don't even wanna start that conversation, which I think is absolutely ridiculous.
It's a huge detriment. And then we
Yes,
are like, from a social psychology standpoint, we're
yeah,
hurting ourselves because, when we don't address sex in a positive way and in healthy, nourishing ways, it becomes very much, you know, it can become a forbidden fruit, which it isn't. And then, and it can all, so it becomes something it's not. And then B, it becomes this thing where, um, it opens doors for, okay, well, nobody wants to talk about it this way. So does it have to be secretive? Does it have to be, taboo? Does it have to be something that I have to figure out on my own? And that it doesn't even have to be like that. And you're right. I think that, um, as physicians, of course, we have a role that we can play in this, but also at homes, I think everyone who's listening, like, we all have roles we can play in this. And we can think about and if you feel like you are also impacted by the stigma of this stuff, then I would talk to, there are, even female scholars. There are female scholars specifically about sexual education that, and they're on Instagram. They're like, there's a lot of different spaces for this that you can ask questions that you yourself can get educated about. But then also, being there for our children, especially, again, I'm going to say it, like daughters, and even, yes, even sons, because there's such a misunderstanding for them too about like what this is and what it could be, and how to positively frame it and look forward to it when you're at this place where you're ready and you're going to take the responsibility of it. And these are topics that I don't know why avoidance of them feels like that's somehow going to fix the problem.
I know. It's a big problem. It really is. So what are some red flags that mental health is impacting a relationship more seriously than people realize?
Oh, like a relationship, like in marriage.
Yeah, yeah, like, what would be, like, a red flag that the mental health of a person is really, a detriment to that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, checking out is one of the earlier red flags. If you see that the person is, and this is what I would say for, partners, to observe about your spouse, is more along the lines of the things that they're usually interested in. They start, feeling hesitant about, or just straight out not being interested in. For example, if you have a person who's, usually very social, they like to be social with friends and stuff, but they're starting to reject, going out, they're starting to be more isolating. Those things, they seem small, but they're actually one of the first things that we notice that something's wrong. If they're starting to, and it's not all the way until, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not showing good hygiene. It's actually not. By then, it's pretty late. It's more about those smaller things. Like, and this is why it's, to go back a few steps, it's important to know your spouse. Like, if and really know, like, what are those things that, tell me that she's happy, or he's happy. If is it that he's not, joking as much anymore? Is he more tired? Is he more irritable? For men, a lot of the times, one of the first signs is increased irritability, more so than women. Like you were mentioning, like, for some people, you're like, yeah, they rage. Other people get sad. For women, it's more likely to be the sadness. Women can get irritated and things like that, but usually you'll see the sadness as a sign of things not being so great. But for men, you see increased irritability more than other signs. And
Mm,
so those things are, when they start happening, when these kind of shifts happen, one-offs aren't enough. But if you're starting to see patterns, like this is becoming a common thing, that's when I would honestly address with them before it gets to a point where there's defensiveness, before the person doesn't even notice that there's a difference because they've been acting that way now for several months. Like, it's okay to ask, like, are you okay? Was it just a bad day, or have you been feeling like this for a while? You know?
yeah. Yeah, I think there is, people are nervous to ask somebody about, how they're feeling and their mental health, and One of the most interesting things that I almost thought was counterintuitive when I was doing like my psych rotation, as a student, was that if somebody is suicidal, to actually ask them if they've thought of hurting themselves, right? Because then I feel like, I think the thought was that, like, oh no, I'm putting that idea into their head. But they say that you should just say it, right? Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. So saying quiet parts out loud is actually helpful because it's the thing is when things are in our own heads, they're not as actually as alarming. Like because we said it so many times and this thought starts sticking. So we're just kind of like, we actually start normalizing it. And that's more dangerous, you know? And so if the person is thinking about suicide and they've been thinking about suicide, if they've done it enough, it's sticking. And so when
Mhm,
a person outside of themselves goes, "Are you thinking about this?" It's jarring. It's kind of
mhm,
like, because now you have to admit that you were thinking about it. And
mhm,
then all of a sudden it becomes real. Like, and that's why it's important even and think about it even on smaller things like suicide is of course one of those things, but even on smaller things when like sometimes I find with my kids, like if I'm like suspecting like they're not like like I'll ask my kid, like I'll ask my son, did you pray, you know and then like he'll like, and I'm like, you didn't. Like, like I got you. And but the thing is if I just assume like oh well, I don't really want to know, like I don't want to think of him as like shirking his the prayers or something like that, then all of a sudden I don't know, and he might not be or he might be like, but it's always better to know, and it's always better to know that you kind of actually, I'm not asking to do a gotcha moment. I'm doing it, I'm actually asking because I care.
yeah,
And that's for everything. So I always so yes, for my patients, and over time, this is just a part of our normal conversations. How bad, I'll even say, how bad are the thoughts? Because they've admitted it to me before. Yeah, no, they're better. They used to be like this. Now they're like that. So now when I'm getting my patient to think more about it, it's not becoming, it's not getting stuck in their brain. It's becoming more like intellectual exercise. And they're also now starting to see it as a symptom rather than something they want to do. Oh, when I start feeling suicidal, I got to tell Dr. Masood. Like, so they
mhm,
start being able to see it objectively as a symptom of depression rather than see it as something that, oh, I really want this.
mm. So interesting, so good.
Yes.
So, I want to actually get into a little different topic, and I want to get to it because I don't want us to lose time. I have this
Oh,
here. This is your fantasy book that you
yes.
published. It's called Unnamed. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. And so I was a pre-med student, obviously in undergrad, but I was also an English major. And writing was always part of what I've wanted to do. The funny thing is my parents also, who are physicians, were like, "Oh, so you want to write medical journals?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, sure." you know?
Such a like a parent thing to say,
It's
right?
such
Like,
a parent thing, and so that's, I mean, but that's why they would let me do the English major, right? And so anyway, and so, yeah, so I always did a lot of creative writing and things like that, and it finally came to a point where, and like I was saying with psychiatry, so much of it is about, narrative and storytelling, and, I know my patients, in that way, and I use a lot of metaphor when we're talking, and, parables and things like that, because again human beings learn so well from things that have a degree of separation. When we're talking about like um, domestic violence, for example, if we're talking about that and I'm using my patient's example, my patient can be very defensive. But if I use another example, like maybe in something in the news that I saw of something, that actually allows that patient to see it more clearly because she's not so stuck in the, she's can't see the forest for the trees. And so storytelling is very much like that, and that's why I think human beings have always gravitated towards, stories. And even as Muslims, we know this, there's so much stories in the Quran. And so, and that's on purpose. Because we believe that our Creator knows how we think and how we learn, and storytelling is one way that we learn. And so that was one of the reasons that I'm like, oh, I finally want to write. But my book is very much, again, like brings in psychology. Like you'll see my characters really deal with like things like generational trauma. You'll see my characters deal with self questioning and self worth. You'll even have you'll have my characters have a lot of growth. Like it's very important for me, like character arcs. It's a very character driven story for being a fantasy. Fantasy tends to be a lot of like plot and quest and we have to get the ring to Mordor and like things like that. But this one has all those things, but it has a lot of character. Is very character centric, and it also deals with a lot of world truths right now. And and I say this to all of my readers and audiences, but it's very anti-colonial. You and I have come from cultures that were colonized, and so many of us have. And colonization has just taken on a different face nowadays, and it looks a little different. It claims different things, but it's still there. And I explore in this book about what colonization does to the mind, like a colonized mind, and how that's dangerous because of what it can do to us, but what it can perpetuate, and so it's a fairy tale retelling. It's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. So it has things about like magical deals. And of course, when you make magical deals, bad things happen. We all know that, especially in stories. And follows a person who's very, very conflicted about what she's seeing in her kingdom. And she makes a deal and it has very unexpected results. And she must deal with those results. And I think it has twists and turns. It has romance. It has everything that I think really gravitate to fantasy, like make fantasy readers gravitate to it. But it also has a lot of heart and a lot of themes and timely themes. So that's my book, and
Oh,
I'm so happy that it's been resonating with so many people.
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm going to start reading it. It sounds amazing. So I know we're going to kind of just go a little bit back. And so if you were to give somebody, three key pearls about mental health, right? Um, what would you say to somebody, that is seeking help or feeling, just down or something what would be like the key things that you would tell them to look out for or know about mental health?
I would say that it's not. So I think the things that to I would frame it as what it's not.
Yeah.
And first. And so what it's not is that it's not going to, you know, change you. Like people are worried that medication changes you or it changes the way you think or it makes you a different person and all of that. And that it doesn't do that. For me, the way to approach medicine specifically, if you're considering that with mental health, or if you're just curious even about what these meds are, you hear so much about them, is that they just lower the volume on the feeling. So if it's anxiety, it lowers the volume, so you actually get to be the loudest, like you, who you are, and your voice gets to be the loudest in your head instead of the anxiety or even the depression. It's more like that. I say that it's a lot. It's similar to a life jacket. It gets your head above water, but it doesn't teach you how to swim. And then say that therapy does. Like so. Once you're feeling like you're not drowning, you're able to start building different types of skill sets and tools, and they're very individual. I don't have a single person who has depression the same way or anxiety the same way. It's all very much your story and your life. And therapists and doctors and psychiatrists, we're all there to meet you where you're at. We're not trying to fit you into one particular outcome, and we're not trying to make you think a one particular way. And we really want you to be the best versions of yourself. That's what we're trained for. So, those are the few takeaways that I would say is where you can start thinking about mental health.
Hmm. And what gives you the most hope?
Oh man, it's honestly I've witnessed so much. So Sadaf, like Alhamdulillah, like I've honestly witnessed so much growth for people that every misconception I may have even had of how much people can change has been completely like altered since I've become a psychiatrist. I have patients in their 80s and they've changed.
Wow.
So, and whenever we say things like, oh, people are set in their ways, it's not true. Like human beings are very much capable of changing at different points in their life because sometimes we needed to get to that point for things to make us commit to it, or change our outlook. Like sometimes we had to be a parent to understand parenthood, right? And sometimes we have to be in a relationship to understand the give and takes in relationships. And so there's wisdoms that can come as people age too, or have different life experiences. So I think what gives me the most hope is that people are very capable of change. And so even the ones that I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, how can they believe this, or how can they say that, and things like this. I've even seen those people be like change. It just what it requires though is a willingness to, like a willingness to be able to be self-aware, and a willingness to be able to question things. And then after that point anything can really happen. So I'm very hopeful. I feel like mental health, I mean, I tell my patients the first day I meet them, I'm like, I wouldn't have gone into a field. I'm not that much of a masochist to have gone into a field that nobody gets better. I said, if for me, it's not a question of if people get better, it's a question of when. It
Yeah.
truly is.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, for all those watching and listening, and those that are thinking like, wow, Dr. Masood is so amazing. Where can they find you? How can they reach out to you? How can they actually even access that peer-to-peer physician online helpline?
Sure, absolutely. So with the physician support line, you can just Google physician support line. It'll be the first thing that comes up, or go to physiciansupportline.com. It's very easy. The phone number's right on there. If you're on your phone doing it, there's a call me button right there. If you're not on your phone, the phone number pops up right away when you Google that. And yeah, we're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to midnight. So you guys are welcome to call. This is open for, it's anonymous, it's free, and it's open for medical students all the way to retired physicians. And so anyone can call about anything, actually. And so that is, and we're still here. We're still here to answer your call. So that's the physician support line. If you wanted to follow me, I have my psychiatry Instagram, and that's shrink wrapping is the name of that.
Drink
Yeah,
something.
shrink wrapping. And
Amazing.
so SHRINK, and then the wrapping is spelled as in a rap, like you're a rapper, RAPPING. So shrink wrapping. And so I'm on Instagram with that, and on Threads with that. And then if you want to know about my whole author journey and my book release and where it's going from here, you can find me at MS Masood Author. And that's on Instagram as well. So, and then on TikTok, though I'm not very active there.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Sure.
And I really appreciate it. And well, we are done here, and it's been real and really intimate. Remember, this is not meant to be any type of medical advice. So if you have any questions about your mental health, please go seek help with a healthcare provider. And until next time, this is the Muslim Sex Podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a review, share and like the podcast. And if you leave me a review, I'd love to shout you out on social media. So be sure that you share it with all your friends. And thanks for listening.